Welcome, everybody, back to the Friar Talk podcast and YouTube channel. For today's episode, we're going to do a little player profile on Eguy Rosario. Now, he was recently ranked 55th in the ZiPS or Fangraphs top 100 prospects of 2022. Now, this isn't like a true talent prospect ranking, but it's about who can provide the most this upcoming year in terms of MLB production. So, Eggy, he's likely to, get promoted somewhat soon. He's a guy that could have some immediate impact in San Diego, maybe somewhere else, but we wanted to discuss that today. So, Chase, you want to get into Eggy as a player a little bit, and then we'll kind of talk about him as a trade piece and just like his overall future in San Diego?
Yeah, so Eguy Rosario, he's currently ranked the 15th prospect in the system. He's very similar to Tucupita Marcano. He's an infielder. He's a smaller guy. He's 5'9". They have his weight at 150. I don't know if that is completely accurate. He might have put on some extra weight. In his last season in 2021, he spent the entire year in Double-A playing 114 games. He hit 281 with a 360 on base percentage and a 455 slugging, so an 815 OPS, which is pretty good. He only hit 12 home runs though. I don't see those power numbers increasing. And as of right now, his scouting grades are 45 hit, 45 power, 55 run, 60 arm, field 45. So he's a pretty decent prospect overall. His numbers have actually been pretty well regarding his entire minor league career. He's one of those guys. I think he's going to be like a Tucupita Marcano, where he's going to be a really good kind of utility player that might not be every day, but has the potential to be more. And since he's only an infield prospect, I do think he's going to be trade bait, and he's going to do well for whatever team he goes on. But just with how well the infield is stacked, I mean, you have Manny Machado, you have Tatis, you have Cronenworth, and that leaves the only base open is first. And, him being 5'9" and only being 150 pounds, you want more power out of your first. And then you probably want him a little taller, especially with the way Tatis and Machado throw. So realistically, he doesn't have anywhere to go on the Padres. Even if you put him at DH, you want some more power out of him. And he's just not really going to provide you that. So he's going to be kind of your typical second baseman, unless he puts on more weight and adds more power. But he's not going to be a Padre. He's going to be trade bait. And he's going to be probably, like I said, Tucupita Marcano. He's going to be a utility guy that can play multiple infield spots, possibly outfield if they needed to. He has the arm for it. He has the speed for it. So it's just one of the things where unfortunately he's blocked. So what can you do?
Yeah, so last season he played in Double-A, put up pretty good numbers. Chase, you brought it up, 281 average, pretty solid hitter. His hit grade, I think, is what, 50? I think it's 50, 40. According to MLB.com, it's 45 hit grade, 45 power, 55 run, 60 arm, 45 field, 45 overall. Is that the same one that you brought up, Chase, the MLB.com one? Because I know that scouting reports differ. Yeah, so same thing that Chase brought up. So not a ton of upside in terms of a hitter, not a ton of upside in terms of just athletic profile. But he's put up solid numbers. He seems like he's going to be able to be a baseball, like an MLB caliber player for quite some time, kind of a guy that's almost like a platoon piece, or he's a role player, or he's able to bounce around and play a bunch of different positions. But being 5'9", not being super tall, I do think it definitely hurts like his upside and his trade value as well. Considering that he's mostly a second baseman and a shortstop, there is like no chance that the Padres are going to have him start this next year. Or not start, I'm sorry, but like be in the MLB to start the season next year, even as a role player, because you have Ha-Seong Kim ahead of him. You have Jurickson Profar ahead of him already. You have those two guys as depth pieces, and like it just seems very, very unlikely. Not to mention, CJ Abrams is going to get the call before he does as well. So like that's another guy that you're going to put ahead of him. And the Padres have a surplus of middle infield talent as well coming up through their farm system. So I also expect that Eguy Rosario will be traded. Now, one thing that someone brought up is that, and you brought up too, Chase, that he could have a Tucupita Marcano type season. And when we did our live stream yesterday, and I'm sorry to whoever said it, or the other day, I'm sorry to whoever said it. I don't remember who it was, but someone brought up, I think he's going to play that same role, and it's going to be a very, very similar season than Tucupita had last year. He gets moved to the deadline. I think that's extremely likely. Now, I also think it's very likely that he's traded after the lockout ends before this season. Um, and I think that you're going to see, I think that we should expect to see a lot of Padres traded. That's something that I don't feel like it's got brought up that much. But the Padres have so many guys that are ready to graduate from either double or triple A into the MLB, and they do not have enough roster spots. So there's going to be a lot of players that must get traded because they don't have a roster spot, and they need to either be on the 40 man or they need to get promoted soon. They're just kind of waiting for no reason. And other teams are going to want that. Eguy Rosario putting up the numbers that he's put up in Double A, facing that high caliber pitch, pretty high caliber pitching there. He's a guy that can go and play for a team that might not be ready to contend this next year, and he can even be a starter. He can be a depth player that plays throughout the infield and is like the backup infielder for a team, like for the entirety of a team's infield. And for a younger team, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense to take this guy and kind of develop him and put him into that role. And then maybe he plays in that role for that team for 5 years. But I find it very hard to believe that he will not be traded, just because of the position he plays, the athletic profile, and really the other guys that are in the Padres farm system, and then also in the MLB, and all the money tied into the infield as is. So I just don't think it's going to be that likely that we're going to see him in San Diego for that long. Maybe he does bounce around between AAA and the MLB this year, and we see him get some at bats, get some playing time. And obviously, you don't want this, but if it was some injuries in the Padres infield, he could also be a guy that could get promoted. But I also would expect CJ Abrams to get promoted before him. So that's kind of where I'm at on Eggy. I do wonder like what his eventual position will be. I'm expecting him to always be a guy that can just play like a bunch of different spots and maybe potentially pick up, can he play corner outfield down the road? But that's kind of where I'm at on him. I think that he's going to get a handful of at-bats this year and then ultimately get moved at or before the deadline this season. Chase, you there with me on
Yeah, I
that?
agree. I think he might even get traded before the season starts. That's kind of where I'm at. We've seen him linked to a lot of Eric Hosmer deals, like Eric Hosmer, Campy, and maybe Eggy to get rid of Eric Hosmer's entire contract. There's been a lot of him like, okay, if we trade for Matt Olson, he's going to be in this package. He's just kind of been a guy that's thrown around in every trade deal just because he's blocked, as is almost every other middle infielder except Abrams. He's the only one really a shot at playing in the MLB right now, just because his talent is that good. That he's quick as hell. He can play the outfield. And worst case scenario, you trade Eric Hosmer, Jake Cronenworth moves over to first, and now there's an infielder spot open for Abrams. I don't think you do that for Eguy Rosario. I don't think you do that for any of the rest of the middle infield prospects. So there's going to be, like Matt was saying, there's going to be a lot of guys traded either at the deadline or right before the season starts, just because they're blocked. The only places that aren't blocked is if you're a first baseman, you're a catcher. Even catcher's kind of 50-50 right now. Or you play outfielder, and of course, you can never have enough pitchers. But for infield, you guys are SOL. I mean, that's kind of what you get when you have Cronenworth, Tatis, and Machado. And AJ Preller is insistent on drafting a middle infielder in the first round for every single year or in the second round. It's like, you know what? What do we need? We're going to draft a catcher, we're going to draft a second baseman or shortstop, and we're going to draft a center fielder. AJ Preller loves going up the middle. All those positions, that's what AJ Preller stocks up on. Unfortunately, when you have all the players that the Padres have right now up the middle, makes it hard for them to get promoted to the MLB.
Yeah, definitely is the case. I don't know. I just kind of wonder how it's going to play out with a lot of these guys. I find it interesting that a couple years ago, especially in 2020, when the Padres moved a bunch of guys, we talked about their farm system as being really underrated because the Padres farm system has not been ranked that highly lately. And people were like, look, this is what happened when you trade all your talent. We're like, what do you mean? Like there's not enough roster spots for all of these people. And that's still the case today. Like that's still the case after we saw the Padres trade like 15 dudes over the past couple years. So I just always find that kind of argument interesting for like, oh, they like blew their farm systems. Like, no, they have the top end guys that they've been like growing. They have their younger tier of international prospect, their younger tier of drafted guys. Some high upside pitchers like Justin Lane, like the farm system is built pretty well, but there are a large group of players that are going to be either brought up to MLB soon or going to be traded soon. I think Eguy Rosario is definitely on that list. And I do think he's going to be a pretty solid baseball player for quite some time, just because he's just kind of one of those guys like, yeah, he might not have the crazy athletic profile, but we see this in baseball all the time where it's like, yeah, he sticks around. He knows how to work the count. Smart player, good fielder, like just checks all the boxes and gets it done. Maybe outside of like the power department, but even like 12 home runs, like that's not horrible. I mean, I guess in today's MLB, it's becoming a much bigger thing. But maybe that's something that where he adjusts his swing and he even improves there. We've seen a lot of small baseball players. I think the biggest one that he'll bring up is Altuve. But we've seen smaller baseball players being able to generate a lot of power as well. So maybe Eggy's able to do that. But for right now, it doesn't make much sense that he's going to have much of a future in San Diego, unfortunately. But thank you all for listening. That's going to do it for this episode. Let us know if there's any other prospects you want us to talk about. Obviously, not much going on right now in the MLB landscape, but we'll hopefully be able to get you guys a lockout update soon if there's something worth talking about. If not, we're going to keep going through some of these topics, and anything that you guys bring up or want us to talk about, we will definitely discuss. But thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you guys very soon.